I gave our baby my ex's last name as a joke when I filled out the birth certificate, thinking my boyfriend would laugh when he found out. Instead, he went completely silent, asked me to repeat what I'd just said, and then told me he was calling his lawyer. I thought it was harmless fun, but apparently putting another man's name on our child's birth certificate is grounds for a custody battle. Tyler and I had been home from the hospital for exactly 3 days when I decided to show him the official birth certificate that had arrived in the mail. I was so proud of my little surprise, convinced that he'd find it as hilarious as I did. Our daughter Sophia was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, while I handed him the document with a big grin on my face, waiting for his reaction to what I thought was the perfect prank. Tyler looked at the birth certificate for a long moment, his brow furrowing as he read the name listed. Then he looked up at me with confusion and asked who Rodriguez was, since that wasn't his last name or mine. I laughed and explained casually that Rodriguez was Jake's last name, my ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago. And wasn't it funny that our daughter now officially had his surname instead of Tyler's? The color drained from Tyler's face as he processed what I'd just told him. He asked me to repeat exactly what I'd said, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. When I confirmed that yes, I'd put my ex-boyfriend's last name on our daughter's birth certificate as a joke, Tyler set the document down very carefully and told me he was calling his lawyer immediately. I tried to laugh it off, telling him it was just a harmless prank and that we could always change it later. But Tyler wasn't laughing. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time, trying to understand how someone could think it was appropriate to put another man's name on their child's birth certificate. He asked me if I understood what I'd done, if I realized the legal implications of what I thought was just a joke. That's when I started to panic. Tyler had never looked at me with such a mixture of anger and disbelief before. He picked up his phone and started scrolling through his contacts, muttering something about needing to call his attorney right away. I begged him not to overreact, insisting that it was just a silly mistake that we could fix easily, but he was already walking out of the room. Within hours, Tyler had packed a bag and left for his parents' house, taking only his essentials and leaving me alone with 3-day-old Sophia. He wouldn't answer my calls or respond to my texts, and when I tried to reach him through his family, they told me he'd asked them not to give me any information about his plans. For the first time since this whole thing started, I began to realize that my joke might have consequences I hadn't anticipated. The custody papers arrived a week later, delivered by a process server who found me at home in my pajamas, still trying to figure out how to manage a newborn on my own. Tyler was filing for primary custody of Sophia, citing concerns about my judgment and decision-making abilities. The legal documents mention the birth certificate incident specifically, describing it as evidence of my unstable behavior and questionable commitment to our daughter's welfare. I called Tyler immediately, but his number went straight to voicemail. I tried his parents, his siblings, even his co-workers, but everyone had been instructed not to discuss the situation with me. The lawyer whose name was on the custody papers told me that Tyler was serious about pursuing full custody and that I should retain my own attorney as soon as possible. That's when the reality of what I'd done finally hit me. This wasn't just about a birth certificate anymore. It was about whether I was fit to be Sophia's mother. Tyler was questioning my judgment so severely that he was willing to take our daughter away from me entirely. The joke that had seemed so funny in the hospital now looked like evidence of serious mental instability. Let me explain how we got to this point, how a relationship that had seemed to be going well could be destroyed by what I thought was harmless fun. My name is Megan, I'm 25 years old, and I met Tyler 10 months ago at a mutual friend's party. I was working as a retail manager at a department store downtown, and Tyler was an accountant at a mid-sized firm that handled small business clients. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of trivia nights and our mutual hatred of romantic comedies. Tyler was different from most of the guys I'd dated. He was serious and responsible, the kind of person who planned his meals for the week and actually stuck to a budget. He talked about the future with certainty that I'd never experienced in my previous relationships, discussing things like retirement savings and home ownership as if they were achievable goals rather than distant fantasies. The relationship moved fast, faster than either of us had probably intended. We'd been dating for only 6 weeks when I found out I was pregnant, a discovery that sent both of us into a state of shock. I'd been on birth control, but apparently not consistently enough, and suddenly we were facing the reality of becoming parents when we barely knew each other. Tyler's reaction to the pregnancy surprised me. Instead of panicking or suggesting we weren't ready for this, he immediately started talking about our future as a family. He suggested I move in with him so he could take care of me during the pregnancy, and he threw himself into preparation with the same methodical approach he brought to everything else in his life. Within a month, I'd moved into Tyler's apartment, and he'd already started converting his home office into a nursery. He bought pregnancy books and read them cover to cover, researched pediatricians and daycare centers, and started a savings account specifically for baby expenses. His excitement and commitment were touching, but they also felt overwhelming to someone who was still processing the reality of an unplanned pregnancy. The truth was, I wasn't over my previous relationship. Jake Rodriguez had been my boyfriend for 2 years, and our breakup 8 months before meeting Tyler had been devastating. Jake was everything Tyler wasn't: spontaneous, unpredictable, exciting in ways that kept me constantly off balance. He was also unreliable, commitment-phobic, and ultimately unfaithful, which was why our relationship had ended. But even though I knew Jake was wrong for me, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I still followed him on social media, checking his profiles multiple times a day to see what he was doing and who he was with. When I'd announced my pregnancy on Facebook, I'd secretly hoped Jake would see it and feel some kind of jealousy or regret about losing me. Tyler was aware that I'd had a serious relationship before him, but he didn't know the extent to which Jake still occupied my thoughts. He didn't know that I compared everything he did to how Jake would have handled the same situation, or that I sometimes felt like I was settling for stability instead of choosing passion. During my pregnancy, Tyler worked extra hours to save money for the baby, often leaving early in the morning and not returning until late at night. While I appreciated his dedication to providing for our family, his absence left me with too much time to think about my past and wonder whether I was making the right choices for my future. I'd always been someone who craved attention and drama, probably to an unhealthy degree. In high school and college, I'd been known for making outrageous statements just to get reactions from people. I'd pull pranks that went too far, make jokes that crossed lines, and generally behave in ways that kept me at the center of whatever social situation I was in. Tyler had seen glimpses of this behavior during our relationship, but he'd attributed it to pregnancy hormones and stress about becoming a first-time mother. He'd gently suggested that maybe some of my jokes weren't as funny as I thought they were, but he'd never directly confronted me about my need for attention or my tendency to push boundaries. When I went into labor 3 weeks ago, Tyler was incredible. He stayed by my side through 18 hours of difficult labor, never leaving the room even when I was being unreasonable and demanding. When Sophia was finally born, I watched him cry as he held her for the first time, talking to her about how much he loved her and how he was going to be the best daddy he could be. The birth certificate paperwork came up while Tyler was out of the room getting coffee from the hospital cafeteria. The nurse handed me the forms and asked me to fill them out carefully, since they would be the official record of Sophia's birth. As I looked at the blank line for the baby's last name, a thought popped into my head that seemed hilarious at the time. I wrote Rodriguez in the space for Sophia's surname, imagining Tyler's face when he discovered that our daughter officially carried my ex-boyfriend's name. In my exhausted post-labor state, it seemed like the perfect practical joke, something we'd laugh about for years to come. I was so pleased with my cleverness that I could barely contain my excitement about revealing the surprise. The nurse who collected the forms didn't question my choice, assuming that Rodriguez must be either Tyler's last name or that we'd chosen to use my maiden name for some reason. I didn't correct her misunderstanding. enjoying the secret knowledge of what I'd done and anticipating Tyler's reaction when he found out. During the 3 days we spent in the hospital after Sophia's birth, I managed to keep my secret, even though it was killing me not to share the joke with Tyler. Every time he talked about our daughter or held her, I thought about how funny it would be when he discovered that she was officially Sofia Rodriguez instead of Sophia with his surname. Tyler was so focused on learning how to be a good father that he didn't pay much attention to the administrative details of Sophia's birth. He trusted me to handle the paperwork correctly, never imagining that I would think it was funny to put someone else's name on our daughter's birth certificate. When we finally got home from the hospital, I could barely wait for the official birth certificate to arrive in the mail. I planned the whole reveal carefully, choosing a moment when Tyler was relaxed and happy, thinking that would make him more likely to appreciate the humor in what I'd done. But Tyler didn't find it funny at all. His reaction was immediate and devastating, making it clear that what I saw as a harmless prank, he saw as evidence of serious problems with my judgment and priorities. The fact that I'd put another man's name on our daughter's birth certificate suggested to him that I wasn't fully committed to our family, or that I was still emotionally involved with my ex-boyfriend. Within 24 hours of my big reveal, Tyler had consulted with a family law attorney who explained the serious implications of what I'd done. Putting the wrong father's name on a birth certificate could raise questions about paternity, create legal complications for things like insurance and inheritance, and suggest that the mother was either confused about the father's identity or deliberately trying to deceive someone. The lawyer advised Tyler that my behavior could be used as evidence in a custody proceeding, demonstrating that I lacked the judgment necessary to make important decisions about our daughter's welfare. The fact that I'd thought it was funny to put my ex-boyfriend's name on Sophia's birth certificate suggested that I might not be a stable influence in her life. Tyler made the decision to file for custody after several sleepless nights spent wondering what other poor decisions I might make regarding Sophia's care. If I could think it was appropriate to put another man's name on her birth certificate as a joke, what else might I do that could harm or endanger our daughter? The custody battle that followed was brutal and public, with details of my birth certificate prank spreading throughout our social circle and beyond. Friends and family members were forced to choose sides, with most of them supporting Tyler's position that my behavior had been inappropriate and concerning. The court ordered an investigation into the circumstances surrounding Sophia's birth certificate, including interviews with hospital staff who confirmed that I'd filled out the paperwork myself and that Tyler had not been present when I'd made the decision to use my ex-boyfriend's name. Social services became involved, conducting home visits and psychological evaluations to determine what custody arrangement would be in Sophia's best interests. The social worker assigned to our case was particularly concerned about my explanation that the whole thing had been intended as a joke, noting that most parents wouldn't find humor in official documents related to their child's identity. Jake Rodriguez, my ex-boyfriend, was contacted by the court system and required to provide testimony about his relationship to Sophia. He was as confused as everyone else about why his name appeared on a birth certificate for a child who wasn't his, and he made it clear that he wanted no involvement in the situation I'd created. Jake's testimony revealed that I'd been in contact with him throughout my relationship with Tyler, liking his social media posts and occasionally sending him messages that suggested I wasn't fully committed to my new relationship. This evidence supported Tyler's argument that I was still emotionally attached to my ex-boyfriend and that putting his name on Sophia's birth certificate hadn't been entirely random. The legal process of correcting Sophia's birth certificate turned out to be complicated and expensive, requiring multiple court appearances and extensive documentation to prove that Rodriguez was not her father and that the name had been entered incorrectly. The whole ordeal created a permanent paper trail that would follow Sophia throughout her life, potentially causing confusion and requiring explanation whenever she needed official documents. During the months-long custody battle, I was allowed only supervised visitation with Sophia, with a social worker present to monitor my interactions with my daughter. These visits were awkward and artificial, making it difficult to bond with the baby I'd carried for 9 months and given birth to. Tyler, meanwhile, was awarded temporary primary custody based on his demonstration of stable judgment and appropriate parenting priorities. He moved back into his apartment with Sophia, creating a nursery that reflected his careful planning and genuine excitement about being a father. The court ultimately decided that my birth certificate prank demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that made Tyler the more suitable primary caregiver for Sophia. I was granted limited visitation rights, with the possibility of increased time if I completed parenting classes and underwent psychological counseling to address my need for attention and drama. The consequences of my joke extended far beyond the custody arrangement. Tyler and I would never be a family in the way we'd planned, and Sophia would grow up in a broken home because I'd thought it would be funny to put my ex-boyfriend's name on her birth certificate. I lost not just my daughter and my relationship, but also the respect of friends and family members who couldn't understand how someone could make such a poor decision about something so important. The story of my birth certificate prank spread through social media, making me infamous in ways I'd never wanted to be. The financial cost of the custody battle left me deeply in debt, unable to afford the quality legal representation that might have helped my case. Tyler's family helped him with his legal expenses, viewing the investment as necessary to ensure Sophia's welfare and safety. Looking back, I can see that my birth certificate joke was just the culmination of a pattern of attention-seeking behavior that had been escalating throughout my relationship with Tyler. My need to create drama and get reactions from people had finally crossed a line that cost me everything I should have valued most. The irony wasn't lost on me that in trying to create a funny story about my ex-boyfriend, I'd actually given him exactly what he'd always avoided, a permanent connection to me through a child who would forever have his name in her official records, at least until the legal correction process was complete. Tyler's commitment to being a good father never wavered, even as he navigated the complex legal and emotional challenges of our custody battle. He attended every court hearing, completed every requirement the court imposed, and demonstrated consistently that Sophia's welfare was his top priority. The supervised visitation arrangement meant that I was essentially a stranger in my own daughter's life, seeing her for a few hours twice a month under the watchful eye of a social worker who documented every interaction for the court's review. Sophia bonded strongly with Tyler and his extended family, who provided the stable, loving environment that the court had determined was in her best interests. She was thriving under Tyler's care, meeting all her developmental milestones, and showing no signs of distress about my limited presence in her life. The legal precedent set by our case was cited in subsequent custody disputes, with family law attorneys using my birth certificate prank as an example of behavior that demonstrated unfitness for primary custody. My poor judgment became a cautionary tale used to educate other parents about the serious legal implications of official documents. Jake Rodriguez eventually obtained a restraining order against me after I continued trying to contact him throughout the custody proceedings, apparently still believing that our brief connection through Sophia's birth certificate meant something significant. His complete rejection of any involvement in the situation finally forced me to confront the reality that my obsession with him had been entirely one-sided. The process of legally correcting Sophia's birth certificate took nearly a year and cost thousands of dollars in legal fees and administrative costs. Every government agency that had received copies of the original document had to be notified of the correction, creating a bureaucratic nightmare that would have been entirely avoidable if I'd simply used Tyler's name in the first place. Tyler's family embraced their role as Sophia's primary support system, with his parents serving as backup caregivers and his siblings helping with everything from babysitting to college savings. They never spoke to me directly about the situation, but their actions made it clear that they viewed me as a threat to Sophia's stability and happiness. My own family was embarrassed and confused by my behavior, unable to understand how I could have made such a catastrophically poor decision about something so important. They supported my efforts to maintain a relationship with Sophia, but they also acknowledged that Tyler's position was reasonable given the circumstances. The social media attention that my story attracted was overwhelmingly negative, with strangers commenting on news articles and blog posts about the custody case, expressing disbelief that anyone could be so thoughtless about their child's official documents. I became a cautionary tale about the dangers of treating serious matters as jokes. Employment became difficult as potential employers Googled my name and found articles about the custody case, making me effectively unemployable in any position that required good judgment or responsibility. I was forced to take low-paying jobs that didn't require background checks or references. The court-ordered parenting classes I attended were filled with parents who had made various mistakes in their relationships with their children, but none of them had done anything quite as deliberately self-destructive as putting the wrong name on their child's birth certificate as a prank. I learned that some jokes aren't funny, that some pranks have consequences that can't be undone, and that putting my own need for attention and drama ahead of my child's welfare was the worst mistake I could have made. The birth certificate that I'd thought would create a funny story had instead created a legal and emotional disaster that destroyed my family and left me with limited access to my own daughter. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And I'm curious, what city are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below. Have you ever made a joke that went too far and had serious consequences? Sometimes our idea of harmless fun can destroy everything we care about. Share your thoughts about where the line should be drawn, and I'll see you in the next story.